It is a mirror of our irresolute human soul. It says, this is how it feels, this is the truth of life. In so doing, it confounds simplistic belief. It resists the constriction of freedom that attaches to society's aggregate fictions, which by their inertia instill a stupor of thought. But literature does not call upon followers. Except the literature of the Bronze Age did. It did call upon followers. The sacred texts of our religions, by reason of their attributed authorship, do call upon followers. The scriptures of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam were produced or revealed in those ages when stories all people had and when their invention was the Word of God. Those residual communal texts were hard-won instructions for survival and discoveries of the intellect that were configured illustratively, sometimes in verse, so as to be transmittable by memory from person to person, long before they came to be written. They gave counsel, they connected the present with the past, they bound the visible to the invisible, and they distributed the sufferings so that it could be borne. Like the stories of today, they made no distinction between fact and fiction, between ordinary communication and heightened language. But for the most part, they were not self-conscious literary texts. All the modes of language which we now distinguish according to the situation we're in had not yet been devised. So language was enchanted, and the very act of telling a story carried a presumption of truth. The Hebrew Bible is clearly a redacted communal creation that was attributed by the very religious in part to Moses. Muhammad too is considered an author, though his words are written down by others. And Jesus' words, actions, and fate are reported on by the Gospelers with the same variable accounts and suspect objectivity that we find in some of today's reporters. But in ancient times, only God or his prophets could hold the esteemed title of author. In the histories of civilization, the right of authorship has descended like a cleansing rain from heavens to the earth. Wars have been fought, orthodoxies have been thrown off, human consciousness has gone through revolutions, and human beings have been reconceived in freedom in order for this to happen. In a modern world deprived by rationalism and science of the comprehensive magic of a divinely conceived universe, all texts are recognized as the products of mortal beings, and every story has to make it on its own. And when Bacon and Galileo insisted on putting claims of knowledge to the test with observation and experiment, storytelling as the prime means of understanding the world was so reduced in authority that today it is only children who continue to believe that stories are, by the fact of their being told, true. Children and fundamentalists. Since 9/11, we have to think perhaps in another way about the ancient writings. Of course, there are hard, real political understandings to apply to the rise of global terrorism, but for the moment, I'd like to continue to draw upon literary ideas, specifically to invoke the poet, essayist, and transcendentalist and lapsed preacher Ralph Waldo Emerson. In his essay on Goethe, he says, "The writer believes all that can be thought can be written. In his eyes, a man is the faculty of reporting, and the universe is the possibility of being recorded." A man is the faculty of reporting, and the universe is the possibility of being reported. Of course, he's not just talking about journalism here. These lines come of an earlier time in American letters when the word universe did not evoke thoughts of the Big Bang, but only meant everything. As Emerson conceived it, we are not about a fixed discoverable universe, but one constantly adjusting to the human inquiry. The universe is the possibility of being reported suggests endless description and infinite surprise. To report the universe is, in any age, a brazen, intention, a kind of Gnosticism, in fact, which asserts that the only contestants are the universe and the unenslaved mind. Emerson's idea of the writer goes right to the heart of the American metaphysic, which is pragmatism. He is saying we don't have the answers yet. He knows he's at a culminant point in literary history where the right of authorship has devolved from gods and their prophets and their priests to everyone. If the universe is the possibility of being reported, there's no end in sight to the variable genius of human character and the full expression of human capacity. A true democracy endows itself with a multiplicity of voices and assures the creation of a self-revising, consensual reality that inches forward over the generations to a dream of truth. By taking our cue from Emerson, we might describe the terror inflicted by the religiously brainwashed nihilists of Al-Qaeda as arising from that part of the world, for many people, where the universe is not the possibility of being reported because it has been accounted for and attributed in its entirety now and forever to a supreme author. And it's inconceivable in an absolutist theocracy, a country run by religious dictate. It's inconceivable in any society where the answers are already given and the rules of life are inflexible, and the authority for all thought is the ruling modality, that free expression in the multiplicity of witness can be anything but an abomination, a danger to the state, or an affront to God, or the state, having done all the writing God has that was necessary for anyone for all time. And so the underlying conflict to come might be understood as between the old stories and the new, or between the fanatical readers of the old and the impertinent writers of the new, between the ancient revealed as divine writings and the literature of our later civilizations, whose authors are immortal, multiple, and while lacking any holy credential or indeed necessary exemption from evil of their own, are engaged in reporting the universe. So those are the things that I've had to say here this evening. I think I'd better stop now, and we can have a conversation. I think what I've tried to show you is the connection to the religious sources of writing, and as well as the political ramifications of writing. I think that's what I've done. I hope that's what I've done. Beats me.
Thought I'd asked.
Oh, well, I don't have a Kindle, so I've never done that. But, in fact, I have to confess I haven't yet asked my publisher if they've put books available for downloading. I will ask them what my royalty is first.
I should hope so.
But as for audiobooks, I've listened to books that way, and I've found it useful. And I've permitted my books to be transcribed. I've always asked for to be involved in the selection of the reader. There are many actors who are wonderful actors who really don't know how to read a book aloud. They think they have to act the book. And the reading of a book is somewhere between acting and just speaking. And many actors don't know that, so you have to be careful about who does this sort of thing. But generally, I think it's very useful. Sometimes you do some things, well, let's put it this way, that I think my experience is when I have the feeling that I shouldn't be writing this, then it's good. I wouldn't call that courage, though. But there's definitely a sense of transgression that's very, very important when you're writing. And I think I learned that at a very, very early age. Perhaps you've heard me tell this story before, but I was a student at the Bronx High School of Science, surrounded by boys who went around in some cases correctly predicting that they would someday win the Nobel Prize in Physics. You can imagine how depressing that was. So I retreated to the local office of the high school literary magazine called Dynamo, and then I enrolled in a journalism class because I just wanted to write. I didn't care what. So it was pretty boring, but finally we got an assignment I could appreciate was to do an interview. So I really, did I tell you this story? I really went to town on that. And I turned in an interview with the stage doorman at Carnegie Hall. He was an old man, a refugee, had escaped Hitler, and lost most of his family. His name was Carl. He was a sweet old man, and he came to work every evening, sort of mismatched blue double-breasted jacket hanging loose and baggy brown pants. He had his lunch in a paper bag and a thermos of tea. And he would drink the tea in the old world style by putting a cube of sugar between his teeth, drinking the tea through the sugar. And all the great artists loved him and called him Rubinstein, Howitz, Arturo Toscanini. They loved him and called him Carl, the stage doorman. So I turned that in, and then I didn't quite expect the teacher's reaction. She called me up to her desk the next day and said, "Edgar, this is the best piece I've ever seen coming out of this class. It's so good, I want to run it in the school newspaper. And what we'll do is send one of the photography kids down to take Carl's picture." I said, "I don't think that's possible." And she said, "Why not?" I said, "Well, he's very shy." And she said, "What do you mean shy? He talked to you, didn't he?" I said, "Well, not exactly." There is no Carl. So there was my lesson in transgressive writing. I got an F. And I was lucky not to be sent to the principal's office. My answer is just enough.